Hey guys, and welcome to Calligraphy 101. Um, so I'm going to show you guys a few basics in getting started with calligraphy and some of the skill sets you will need to improve your handwriting dramatically. So let's get started. First off, I would like to give a list of probably the four main types of handwriting that you should be able to do if you're really interested in getting into calligraphy. And the first one that I'm going to show you guys is the normal one. So we all start learning how to write letters this way since we were young. And I'm going to just write a really simple word like pencil. So it is P-E-N-C-I-L. So that is very simple, very basic. It's how we write. So everything is rounded off, and what's supposed to be straight is straight. Moving on, we are introduced to a harder version, which is italics. Now, I know a lot of people aren't used to writing in italics, and I totally understand that because it could be confusing. And I'm just going to show you guys what it will look like. So it's it's still the same concept, but obviously it doesn't have to be this squished. But in italics, everything is tilted more at a low angle right here. It's tilted at about a 30 to 45 degree angle, and yeah, not too hard to learn. And then moving on, I know not a lot of people does it, but it's cursive, and it might look something like this. And a lot of people prefer to not write in this method because first of all, not a lot of people are used to it, and then it is hard to recognize some of the cursive words. I'm going to talk about why some of these fonts are the way they are, and why cursive is important in learning calligraphy. And last one that I think I don't think it's really that common, but still fun to do. It's the Typewriter Font. So it is. Is a font where everything does seem to be a bit more squared off, and you definitely see a lot more corners. And now I'm going to get into the way that we have been taught to write calligraphy since we were young. So this method or this type of handwriting is the most basic way that handwritings start off with. Ever since we were kids, we learned to trace. These types of things. So here's a little example. It goes something like this. We would always have this as homework in our second grade, and then we will learn to write our alphabet by tracing along the lines. And when we were taking writing classes, we would have our journal, and we would often see the layout looks something like this. They'll have a long line. They'll have a few dotted lines. Another long line. I don't know if this is familiar to you, but this is typically what a journal notebook paper would look like for elementary school students. And a lot of people do fail to understand the importance of the center line right here. I call it the reference line. Of course, others might call it different. And the reason I call it a reference line is because it shows where all of your reference points are. So so let me give you an example. So I'm going to write the letter H. All right, and H would fully utilize the space in a single row. So we are usually this is what I would call reference points, okay? And I would tell you after I show you this, I'll show you why the reference points are the way they are. It's up here, it's down here, and connecting them gives you a letter, something like this. Now, this is actually quite similar, in fact, pretty much identical to a calligraphy paper. It's more like a graph paper, but it gives as a 5x5 box right next to each other, and I feel like that would really help get my point across. So we have a 5x5 box, but we don't usually use the whole box. We usually use only a small portion of it, and we usually use the 3x3 area. Okay, and if these are two letters, the space in between them would be this 2x3 box right here, and the space that will separate them from the next row will be a 3x2 box right here. So yeah, that is what we would organize our letterings to be in a calligraphy box. And a reference point. So the most basic one, a few rule, the first I would like to talk about is when we have a letter, we do not want anything going past the 3x3 area. We want everything to be limited within this area. If we were to go past, that's where a lot of the, for example, where the sentences start to become crooked and the handwriting starts to become messier. That's why a lot of people do have messy and unorganized handwriting, because they often cannot organize their font into a specific. They cannot organize the handwriting to be limited within a certain area. So reference points does help get you used to writing in a more organized manner. For example, when I did an example on the letter H, I basically gave out all of the points, and I think it goes like this, and then down like that. What I did was I tried and split the boxes up even more. Okay, I split them into halves for me to get all of the points onto here, and everything is dispersed evenly, and you get an even letter. Now, if we were to change this up a bit and try, for example, italics. Oh, before I show you that, let me show you the importance of this line right here. So we know that we have a center reference point right here, making sure that the bottom half does not exceed into the area of the top half, but and that is we learn to do that and get used to that at a early age. But a lot of people dislike the Italic font because they are, well, they do something like this, and that looks like an H, but the problem is we write straight, not crooked. And in italic, this area right here, down here, goes past where we're supposed to write. And then here's a little example of what I mean. So if I were to write in italics, here's what the mistake a lot of people make. This part goes past, and the reference point, the center reference point, is not touching the reference line right here. And this is the main issue. It is important for a reference point in handwriting, a reference point it is important for them to always touch the line. No matter how weirdly we shape a letter, the reference point is there to maintain balance and to make an area not too condensed or wide open. So the way we fix that is if there's this reference point, we're gonna have to shift it upward, and then since these reference points stay the same area, it becomes this, something like this, and eventually what you realize is, so here, this part tends to be higher than this part. Unlike the original H, where everything seems extremely balanced, we have a slightly skewed shape. We call this skew to the right because the right side is much higher. It's going up like this. And this is all due to the fact that the reference point does have to match. Now, if we were to fix this, bring this reference point up here and bring the bottom reference point up here, the shape is automatically forced into this, and therefore we no longer have the problem of it going past the line. The reference point, we no longer have the problem of it not touching the line, the center line. And then furthermore, I'm going to now give you guys an example of what an italic shape would look like on a 5x5 square. So we know that the letterings are tilted at a 30-degree angle, and therefore a few more points are needed to be plotted. So in the earlier example, I rarely used the corner points. I used the center points and the points that connected the lines. But now I'm going to show you how I utilize the cross section. So in the letter H, as a matter of fact, whenever there's a long line that's like this, we tend to start with a corner and drop down to a side like this, corner, side. And this gives a, like I said earlier, italics falls between the 30-degree and 40-degree tilt area, and this pretty much gives you a tilt at an angle that doesn't go under 30 and does not exceed 40. So this is a line for H, and then we still have the same reference point, do not forget, right here. These are needed because now we have the center reference point, which is right here, and we want to bring everything over. We want it to end right here. This point is dragged over here, but at the middle point, it is still at, well, it's tilted a little bit to the left. It's not at the middle anymore, and this part is at the middle. But as we know in H, it is not. This is slightly skewed. So if we were to start from this point, we move upward to here to hit this reference line, and we drop back down following this. And as you can see, this H perfectly looks pretty well done actually. And as a matter of fact, it stays within this 3x3 box, same as this one. And that's basically how italics work, and that is why reference points are extremely important. Now, the reason I'm giving examples in lowercase letters, not capitalized letters, is because capitalized letters are actually much easier to do, even though there are some more complicated shapes like R, for example. Okay, it is actually much easier. It is actually not much harder. As a matter of fact, most of these shapes of capitalized letters are larger, and therefore you're able to trace them more clearly. So the only hard ones that I could think of are R, but like I said, the left line, you just do the exact same thing. This is a 30-40 degree tilt, the same reference point. Obviously, I'm used to it, so I don't even need to do the reference point. I know that this part and these 2 points, they balance out. This one, and this one. The second point is tilted, is a little bit more to the left. I am totally aware of that. And this goes around and around, and well, I made a mistake. I started a bit too much to the right, so I'm going to redo it on the side again. So it's R, and then it's going to be like this, and like that. So in the italic, it does not go past this 3x3 box. Sorry, I made a mistake here. It should have gone more. I thought I started right here. But anyways, that's the importance of a reference point. Now, moving on from italic, we have cursive. I'm not going to go too much in detail with the cursive because a lot of times cursive are just a fancier italic. It would be something like this. Okay? And then not much really changed. There's a fancier line right here, and there's a hook for you to connect it to the next letter. And there are many ways that people write cursive, and your own method is should be what you feel most comfortable with. And therefore, I'm not going to teach you guys cursive, but just understand that cursive is built upon the different types of font. The last one I would like to point out is the Typewriter Font, which is a rather rare but cool one, I guess. It is very similar to the circle one in that it is very symmetrical on all sides. And one difference is that it's more of a box. Okay, this part went a little bit over, but it's more of a box shape. The O is more of a box. The B is more of a box. And this might seem awfully strange, but here's the thing with the Typewriter Font. So we know that with boxes, it is parallel, both horizontally and vertically, they are parallel. And a lot of time when people are writing sentences, like for example, I'll write one right now. There's sentences, well, once they get to the right side of the paper, once they get to the right side of the paper, these sentences aren't really straight. And they tend to usually go a bit too high or go a little bit too down. Now with the box or the typewriter handwriting, everything is like a puzzle and they are laid right next to each other. And because they are so straight, it's very difficult for you to you can always use the previous letter you wrote as a reference for you to not go too much off angle. And let me explain why that works. So in normal types of handwriting where everything seems more rounded off, we have an O. Now the O looks the same like this and like this. It's just a circle. And the thing is, and we look at this as a reference when we write our next word, for example, B, right? Jacked, for example. That's fine. But when we're writing, let's say our paper tilts a little bit at like a 10-degree angle. This still looks like a O, you know, and there's nothing that looks wrong with it. So if you continue with it, that's why you start to get a more unorganized and sentence that expands everywhere. However, with the box handwriting, typewriter. We know this is an O. When we tell that this, it's no longer an O, it's a freaking rhombus, and we don't want that. And we'll know to be able to fix ourselves. It's a B. Normally in this part it's a little bit rounded, so naturally we would want to if the paper is tilted, or if our hand is tilted a little bit, we won't be able to recognize and immediately adjust. But with this, we can immediately adjust because everything's just so straight. Even the E is so straight. Even the C. It is hard for you to, after you finish writing a sentence, you pretty much would get a straight line, straight horizontal line. And this is why I like the Typewriter Font so much, and this is why a lot of fonts are built upon this. Now these 4 fonts, so the rounded off, the Italic, the Cursive, and the Typewriter Font, they are the 4 basic fonts that other fonts build off them. Okay, so these are the basic shapes, and there are millions. I'm aware that there are millions and millions of other fonts that people have created over the years. You have Arial, you have Times New Roman, and all of these are just fancier versions of, well, these. Okay, let me give you guys an example. So, do you all still remember? So this is a classic way people write A. When we're young, it's a circle with a line. This is A. In the computer, or the classical version, traditional version of writing A, it's like this. Obviously, I like to write a little bit like this, but you get the point. And there's always extensions to the letters we write. That's what distinguishes one font from another. For example, we know this is a P. Is it necessary to add a little bit of a, this? This tail at the beginning? Is it necessary to add a little bit of a curve? Is it necessary for a Q to have a little hook at the end? No. Is it necessary for an R to start off like this with a little hook at the beginning? No. Is it necessary for letters to have a base wherever there is an edge? No. But this is what distinguishes one font from another. For example, Cambodia, it is a rounded off font. I'm going to use this example, but with a base. It's something like this. It is a little bit like an architectural style, and then like this, and them having the base at the edge of every font is what distinguishes them from something like let's say Times New Roman, which is like for example, if an I looks like this in Cambodia, Times New Roman, the I would look something like this. You can tell this is the difference between one font and another. Okay, so moving on. Here's another thing that I must point out that is important. This is not a calligraphy pen. I have one. I had one. It broke. A normal pen is a great way for you to practice your skills. Now, I talked about earlier how cursive is considered probably one of the most useless handwriting style ever since we were in elementary school. We learn it, mastering elementary school. Well, not master it, but we learn how to do it, and then we forget about it. And for many, it is considered a waste of time. I would like to right now disprove of that argument, because ever since we were young, our hands does not have the muscle for us to write clearly and for us to write smoothly and naturally at a really fast rate. Cursive, however, the style of cursive forces your hand to relax and forces your hand to maintain a smooth motion around your paper, and this builds your muscles and train your hand dexterity. Without cursive, a lot of the things, a lot of your handwriting, a lot of your drawings, they will suck, and that is why it is important to get into practicing writing like that at a very early age. So, now that I'm done with that, time for the fun part. Back to calligraphy pens. A calligraphy pen, it's usually not pointy like this. It is usually a pen with a tip that's flat. It's a flat tip, and if you were to draw down, it's a little bit like a highlighter. If you were to drop down words, it would look something like this. But if you were to go from left to right, everything would be wide, a little bit like this. As a matter of fact, I think it is important for me to demonstrate this concept right now with a highlighter, which is what I'm going to do right now. So pardon me, I'll be back. Alright, I'm back. And I might as well get a new sheet of calligraphy paper and put this aside. This, okay, a highlighter is very similar to a calligraphy pen in that it is flat on one side but sharp on another. So if we were to hold it so that the sharp side is vertical, and if we were to write like this, it is very narrow. But if we were to write it horizontally, the line is much wider compared to the narrow part. I don't know if you can see it clearly. This is narrow, this is wide. And this is like a highlighter is like a calligraphy pen. And when writing calligraphy with a calligraphy pen, unlike a pen, we do not rotate. Okay, we want to have this effect of sometimes being more narrow, sometimes being more wide, and this is an effect. This effect is a result of human perception of three-dimensional objects, and I will get to that in a second. But first, let me show you an example. So I'm going to write pencil. Alright, I know it is difficult to see, but whenever you are horizontal, whenever it is horizontal, it is much wider than the vertical. So as soon as the letter transitions from vertical to horizontal, their length changes, as shown by the little lines I've drew. This is vertical, horizontal is much more wider. Okay, this is horizontal, this is vertical. And I'm pretty sure you all can figure out why this is the case. Okay, because if you hold it in a way, it writes in a way. I'm pretty sure you all understand why it works this way, so I'm not going to talk about it. But what I am going to talk about is why calligraphy looks good like this. This is a box, okay? Alright. We are a human being, and we live in what we see, we try and perceive things in a three-dimensional way. So therefore, instead of just length and width, we give it depth. Okay? So we give it distance that goes away from us, and we like it because we like our font in calligraphy to be like this, because it is what us as human beings are used to, perceiving things as something as not just length and width, but also depth. And here's a cool thing. Here is the letter P. But instead, we're going to make it so that it is much wider. So, okay? Now, let's give it depth. We have length and we have length and width. Let's give it depth. And we expand outwards like this. Now we're going to fill in the depth of the shape. And there we go. A three-dimensional letter. Not bad, right? Actually quite interesting. It looks, we turned a ugly letter by adding depth to it. We turn it into something that actually looks pretty acceptable. And you might have realized this part has depth, this part has depth, but this part is start to fade away until we get to here, where there's no more depth to it. We don't see any here. We see a little bit inside, but not on the right side. And this case is identical to what I was trying to show with the highlighter. It is wide, okay? It is wide here, wide here, wide here, wide here. But once we get to this side, it is narrow. It is narrow, 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 narrow. Because if we were to see something at a depth, for it to make sense in our brain, we can only see depth at one angle. We cannot see it from this angle and on the right side, everything, because then our perception would not make sense. And the same thing with calligraphy pen. If we were to, where's the highlighter? Sorry. If we were to, alright, whatever. I have no idea where I just put the highlighter, but I can go on without it. If we were to force depth onto this side, okay, onto this side, fill them in, we're back to where we started, a bold letter P. Because all we did is expand in every direction. Okay? And we still have a bold letter P. And that's why it is important for us to eliminate these sides that would not make sense in our heads. And a calligraphy pen does do that. If a calligraphy pen was not flat on one side, was flat on multiple sides, for example, it's like a plus sign, then ultimately, if we move it across the paper, it forms a dot, which is no different from what we do with a pen. And that's why a calligraphy pen, it is important for it to be shaped like this. Alright, now, here are some skills you can practice with a pen, okay? Do not get comfortable with your pen and move it from one place to another. It can be left and right if you like it. I personally prefer up and down at an angle. This is what it's like naturally. And then here's the H. I'm still gonna use H because it's a really beautiful example. And I'm just gonna fill it in around it. Like this. And as you can see, this part is if we were to do it that way, this part is extremely narrow. These parts are wide. Okay? And this is because it's tilted at an angle where it's narrow this way, but if we move down, it's wide. And this motion of going back and forth in a straight line is identical to the calligraphy pen being straight on one side and being flat and straight on one side. So over time, after practicing that and adjusting to the different types of font, okay, I'm able to do something like this. So I'm going to do pencil, but in a more calligraphy-like manner. So it's still the same thing, but I'm still doing the same thing I did earlier. But look at exactly how much better. It is. And I'm not gonna brag or anything, but that's impressive that you can change something so simple, and by adding depth to it, you can turn it into essentially what calligraphy is. I mean, this is how people do calligraphy. It's obviously just by knowing what I teach you today isn't going to turn you to a professional or get you anything close to this, because it takes months to years of practice to get used to it. That's why I said practice cursive. Cursive helps you strengthen your muscle. That helps you do this type of stuff. Because at first when I started off, this is hard to maintain. To keep on doing this back and forth, I can't even do one letter because it's so exhausting to all the concentration. But with practice, you will get used to it. Now, let's try a different font, but we add depth to it. But this time we don't add depth. We're gonna see another thing in real life, which is adding a base to it. This is a box. We're gonna use the same example. if we put this box on top of this box, would it fall over? Not likely. But if we were to reverse it, I mean, the top part is overhangs from the bottom part. It is more possible to knock them over than to knock this over. I hope you guys can recognize the difference, but our mind likes to perceive things that into something that makes sense, that are real. In architecture, we observe buildings that are narrow at the top, but the base are forced to expand to maintain all of the weight. And that's another thing we like in calligraphy. Let me show you guys a way of what I mean. So I'm going to just write pencil in regular handwriting. Okay, this is nothing too special. I just want to make it big and clear. This is pencil, okay? And now we're going to add a base to it. A little bit of pillar pull right here, okay? And then wherever it curves, we add extra mass to it to give off the illusion that is handling a whole bunch of weight. And with E, this overhang right here, we give it a little bit. That's E right there. No different for N. There's a base, and here's a base. C. I. L. Just gonna rush this one real quick. But yeah, I hope you guys get the point. Our mind likes to perceive things with depth and with a supporting base. Now what really gets interesting is when we combine the both. So I'm going to use this example because I was just working on it, and I'm going to add depth to it. But this time, we minimize it. So we add a tiny bit. Only a tiny bit. Won't you look at that? By adding a tiny bit of depth to it, combine the both, this looks like something that is printed out like on a newspaper or a magazine. And these are pretty much the two main things we recognize the most in calligraphy. There are also many other factors like consistency, and some people even talk about the golden ratio. So for example, this part is actually supposed to be pushed a little more inward than the bottom part, but we're not going to get into that because from the way it is, it looks great. And now I pretty much this is Calligraphy 101. I pretty much I don't know how long this recording has been going on with. It's at least half an hour, I'm guessing, if not more. I'm going to end it by doing a analysis of some fonts. And one of the biggest fonts, most famous font that I like is the Harry Potter font, which I'm going to search up right now. And we're going to compare and contrast. So as you can see, this part's wide. The middle part on the H, it is very, very thin. There are base. You can see a little base right here on the top, on the bottom, and you can the dark black area right here. You can even see the three-dimensional effects. It is very subtle, but if you observe closely, you can see it, the shading and everything. And I'm going to attempt to replicate that right now, or at least part of it, because this is a really hard one, and I cannot just rush it. But I'm going to replicate it on this paper right now, and show you exactly what it is. So, with the Harry Potter, it starts off 2 lines, very, very simple. This one is slightly longer than this one, and then it's H here. There are 2 H, and then a little bit of that, and exaggerated. Now after we complete the H, we add a little 3-dimensional effect to it. So now we have completed the H. I know it's a little bit wide, but you know. Now we're gonna do a little bit outline of the A of Harry. So this is A, and now now that we got the outline, we're going to complete the font. It actually looks something like this. We're going to add a little bit of base, HA, and a 3-dimensional outline right here. Isn't the best of my work, but it's close enough. It's AR. Now I'm going to do R. We're going to find out how it looks first. It looks something like this. Fair enough. Now base, and base right here. You get the point. Obviously this is it would take longer than, in order to do it properly, it should take longer than I've just did. That's just HAR out of the total Harry Potter. But I was just trying to prove the point that it has base, it has depth. So now we're going to take a look at some of the famous logos. I'm actually going to let's take a look at Nike, for example. This is Nike logo. It's italic. Like I said earlier, the reference line, the E is straight right on the reference line. It does not go past, and well, Nike's really basic, but yeah. we're gonna look at Google. Here's a good one. So as you can see, when it's vertical, this part it's wider horizontally, but when the line is horizontal, it's very thin, and you can see it clear with the O's from the left and right side. They are very wide, but top, up, and down, they are very thin, and this is because we like to see things in depth in a three-dimensional method. So yeah, I hope that this nearly hour-long video, I've been recording for like 50 minutes over. I hope that this nearly hour-long video does show you all the basics you need to improve your handwriting and get started on some basic calligraphy. Obviously, I do recommend you get a starter calligraphy pen, not a normal writing pen. But it is possible, and if you want to learn it this way, I mean, I did it. So yeah, I hope you guys have a good evening. It's literally almost 1 a.m. and sorry if I'm a little tired, but I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and I hope this helped, and adios.